right, so a lot of developing news coming out today. September the 8th, 2025, as we're hearing that around the world there are various nations that are positioning their naval fleets and their armies for what could be an all-out global conflict. We're hearing potentially World War III. Let's go ahead and take a look at the latest headlines so that way you can see it for yourself. Now you can see coming out today, September the 8th, 2025, Russia has revealed nuclear submarine mission in the Pacific coming out today. Also coming out today, September the 8th, 2025, China sends Navy ships to America's doorstep. Also coming out today, September the 8th, 2025, British aircraft carrier emerges on Russia's eastern flank. And also, take a look at this, Finland deploys Israeli Gabriel 5 missile, boosting Baltic naval powers. And you can see here, coming out a couple days ago, naval drills near Guam and the Philippines. They coincide with China's military parade. As I let you know, we saw the adversaries of the United States unite, over 20 adversarial nations in China in that parade coming together. And take a look at this. Venezuelan military jets buzz over U.S. Navy ships in a highly provocative move, the Pentagon says, as we've seen U.S. Navy fleets moving into the Caribbean. And we're hearing Venezuela saying this is an act of war, sending those jet fighters over those ships in a very provocative move. Now, as I mentioned, we saw China have that parade with adversaries. Donald Trump coming out and saying, I know what you're doing. You're conspiring against the U.S. I see you. Well, China flaunted during that parade new hypersonic missiles, new nuclear warheads for potential critical strikes, which they said could hit anywhere in the world, including the United States. And in addition to that, take a look coming out today. Russia has now responded to Donald Trump's sanctions threats. As we saw, I shared with you yesterday, Donald Trump came out and said that he is very upset with the way that Russia has failed to come to the negotiating table with Ukraine. He said it seems like Putin says that, hey, we're going to reach a negotiation, a peace deal, and then that same day strikes Ukraine. And we've seen in the last 24 hours the largest strike against Ukraine since the war began. And he said it is now time to increase those sanctions, get very aggressive with Russia. I'm going to share with you the responses. Vladimir Putin is coming out and saying, we do not care. Now, let me know your thoughts. All these headlines coming out today in the last 24 hours, September the 8th, 2025, are we going to be heading to war? Or are we going to be having peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, war or peace. But a lot speculating with all the conflict taking place. It looks like nations are positioning themselves for potential all-out global war, World War III. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now, in addition to that, do me a favor before we dive in. I'm going to share with you the articles. I'm going to put it on the screen, read right from it. They're all hyperlinked in the description. I cite the sources just like a book report, so that way you can rest assured that this is the latest. If you appreciate that, do me a favor, take a quick second, hit that thumbs up like button. Just helps spread this out further across the YouTube platform while we're live. Thank you so much, really helps out a ton. Also, if this is your first time here and you want to stay up to date on everything that's going on, it's totally free. Why not? All you got to do is hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. I will keep you up to speed on everything as it comes out, so you know exactly what is taking place. So I see war pouring into the comments. I see Champlain saying Putin lies just like Iran does. All I see is war. A lot of people saying right now, everything that's going on. Marion is saying, unfortunately, war. War is happening. War is going to take place. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to get you caught up on all of this so you know exactly what is going on here. Now, before we do, wanted to mention for you very quickly here that if you're retired today or nearing retirement, you're living impossible math. Social Security might go up by $25, but your rent, your groceries, your medicine, everyday essentials, they all cost more. And here's the reality. A lot of retirement savings are just sitting in accounts basically earning nothing. If you've got them in those big institution banks, you're probably getting about 0.4%, 0.01%. Now compare that to today's inflation, 2.7% year over year. That means that every dollar sitting in those low interest accounts are quietly losing value. That's not security. That's a slow leak in your retirement savings. You've worked 30, 40, 50 years to build up your nest egg. You didn't do it to get rich quick. You did it to protect your family, to live with dignity, and maybe leave something behind. But Washington politicians, Wall Street bankers, they're gambling with your life's work and printing money and devaluing the dollar every day. So here's what smart retirees are doing. They're moving part of their 401k or their IRA into gold and silver, not new money, but the savings that you already have. And it's easy.
China and Russia are joining hands, launching one of the world's largest joint military drills. And this comes at a time when tensions between the US and Russia, they have increased to heights unseen since the Cold War. Beijing and Washington are locked into a fierce trade war. More in this next report. Take a look.
Missiles launch, destroyers slice through the sea, and fighter jets scream across the sky. This isn't war, not yet. But it's what war would look like if China and Russia fought side by side. And now they're practicing exactly that. Over thousands of troops, dozens of warships, submarines and aircraft from both countries gathered for massive joint military drills in the Sea of Japan, a region bristling with geopolitical tension. The drills include live fire exercises, anti-submarine operations, air defense, and simulated amphibious landings. Warships prowled the waves, while jets executed low-altitude formation strikes. Beijing and Moscow say the drills are part of the annual cooperation plan between the two militaries.
Both sides will conduct their 6th joint naval patrol in relevant waters of the Pacific. This is part of the annual cooperation plan between the Chinese and Russian militaries. It is not directed against third parties and is unrelated to the current international or regional situation.
But the optics are obvious. The timing not accidental. These war games come as the US deepens alliances in the Pacific, bolstering Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Australia in what Beijing sees as a tightening net. Moscow, on the other hand, is locked in a grinding confrontation with NATO over Ukraine. China and Russia, sensing the strategic encirclement, are making their move loudly. The No Limits partnership between China and Russia, announced just before the Ukraine war, only keeps expanding. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Good morning to you. China has showed off its military might to the world with a parade to mark the 80th anniversary since the defeat of Imperial Japan and the end of World War II. It began with an 80-gun salute to mark each year since the end of the war. Among those watching on from Tiananmen Square, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. It's the first time the three leaders have met and formed part of China's leader's message of power, both military and diplomatic.
Chinese nation is a great nation that is never intimidated by any bullies and always values independence and forges ahead. In the past, when faced with critical struggles between good and evil, light and darkness, progress and reaction, the Chinese people rallied together to defy the enemy.
Well, we just had pictures come in moments ago of a bilateral meeting between President Putin and Kim Jong-un. Quite extraordinary to see there in a formal bilateral. If the pictures earlier of them all together at the broader celebrations weren't amazing enough to see, that had been taking place just moments ago. Well, our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith was at that parade and she filed this report.
this massive event only just finished. Already, almost immediately, they are starting to bust people out. But look, whatever you might think of the politics of what's happened here, the performance was absolutely remarkable. Just the precision, the accuracy, every boot, every turn of the head. In the stand we were in, you could literally feel them reverberating as the tanks rolled past, as the jets came overhead. And there was just this electric atmosphere of sort of anticipation and excitement from the crowds who were members of the public who were just in the area in front of where we were seated. It was a really spectacular show. Look, there's a couple of audiences, I think, for what's happened here today. One is absolutely the Chinese domestic audience. It is a crucial message that they are telling that, look, back 80 years ago, China was invaded and humiliated by Japan, but it was victorious, and just look what has happened since. China is now a major global superpower. It is on the rise, on the ascendancy, and by the way, that is thanks to, as they would say, the CCP and Xi Jinping. So loyalty and party dominance, absolutely a key theme here. Worth saying, actually, in some of the press briefings we had ahead of this event, the notion of loyalty to the party was actually listed as a more important objective than commemorating the end of the Second World War. So that shows just how important that is. But look, absolutely, this is not just about the domestic Chinese audience. Be in no doubt, there was big, important messages for the rest of the world as well. And the key message there is about Chinese power, Chinese might, Chinese ascendancy. And part of that is military power, of course, and that was pretty self-evident with the massive military sort of armory on show, the sort of hundreds of pieces of weaponry and equipment, some that have never been seen in public before, all of which have been Chinese-made. The notion of battle readiness was absolutely a theme that's been continuously pushed this week as well, and certainly the island of Taiwan will be listening very closely to that. But look, it's not just about military power, it is also about political power and the power of allegiances, because this event has been noteworthy, not just because of what has been here and what we've seen, but because of who has been here as well. And it was so notable the whole way through. The host, President Xi Jinping, flanked to his right by Vladimir Putin of Russia and to his left by Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And look, there has been some analysts speculating that the recent closeness of Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, and Kim has sent troops to help Putin in Ukraine of late, there's been some speculation that that has actually irked China, who is the historic ally of those two. Not a sign of that here today. Very much the messaging that these three are in lockstep, and I think absolutely unashamed about the fact that these three are proposing, if subtly or perhaps unsubtly, a new type of global order. So look, the power of China really is the message to take away today. Some questions, of course, whether during a week where it's really portrayed itself as a convener of nations, a builder of bridges, a master of diplomacy, some questions, of course, about whether following that up with a huge military parade and flanked by leaders that many see as pariahs might be slightly undermining to that message, but it is there nonetheless, and perhaps only a country like China could pull it off.
Well, the day after Russia launched the biggest aerial attack on Ukraine, the Ukrainian army admits Moscow has a threefold advantage on the battlefield. The Russian forces are continuing to move forward at this point of time, and this is as Ukrainian forces continue to mount deeper drone strikes inside Russia. Now, the US President Donald Trump has hinted at more sanctions to deter Moscow while saying that he wants to talk to Putin again very soon. Our next report telling you more.
Ukraine is facing its darkest hour. Russia has increased the intensity of attacks. Russian missiles and drones rain down across Ukraine. For the first time in the 3 years of the war, the Russian drones and missiles targeted government offices in the capital, Kyiv. Russia, though, denies targeting civilians in Ukraine. Zelensky says he is counting on a strong U.S. response. Trump told reporters after the assault that he is prepared to move forward on new sanctions on Moscow.
Are you ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing for...
On the ground, Russian battle groups smash through defensive lines near hotspots like Sumy, Kharkiv, and Donetsk. Degrading Ukrainian armored vehicles and artillery in sustained offensives. Russian Defense Ministry claims that over the past 24 hours alone, Ukraine lost about 1,340 soldiers, a claim which cannot be verified independently. Now, Ukraine's top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, revealed Russia's advantage in manpower and firepower has surged to nearly 3 times Ukraine's, especially in critical eastern and southern sectors. Ukraine's response has grown deadlier and more sophisticated, with stealth drones disrupting key targets. Oil refineries, ammunition depots, and command centers from Ryazan to occupied Luhansk. These strikes choke Russian supply routes and halt reinforcements, giving Kyiv leverage amid staggering losses. Russia has intensified its onslaught against Ukraine since a meeting between Trump and President Vladimir Putin on August 15 failed to make any breakthrough on a ceasefire. Russia now occupies around 20% of Ukraine and has said it will continue fighting if peace is not struck on its terms. Bureau Report, WION.
Break down what we do know and just how significant this could be.
Well, we first got an alert to this, actually it was from the Ukrainians, but then we started hearing quite quickly from Polish authorities that Russian drones had entered its airspace and that it had scrambled both its own and NATO air defences in response. Now, the reason that this is important is because it's the first time that it has had to engage Russian assets in its own airspace. So many seeing this as a potential escalation. And we know that the Prime Minister is currently holding an emergency meeting to talk about how they should respond. But in the immediate aftermath, they responded by telling people living in the east of Poland, so near the border with Ukraine, to stay in their houses. They closed airspace over 4 airports, including the main Warsaw airport. That has actually just reopened, but people are being told to expect disruption throughout the day. But I think this is important because it reminds people of how close the war with Ukraine is to NATO countries. And so we know that the Prime Minister has also spoken to the NATO chief about what's been going on. And it also follows him just yesterday announcing that tomorrow he was going to fully close the border with Belarus. And that's because he says that Belarus and Russia are preparing for some military exercises at the end of the week, which he claims are aggressive. So he was already on high alert. Then suddenly in the next few hours, these drones enter the airspace. I think it's important to note these weren't drones that were sent from Russia to Poland. These are believed to have been drones which were targeting Ukraine, which went over the border. But it really is a point of imagine what would have happened if a Polish citizen was killed. So what do they do next? Well, we know there's this emergency meeting. We know that they're talking to the NATO chief. They do have an option if they want to, potentially, of triggering Article 4, the NATO Article 4. That basically allows them to hold consultations with other NATO partners if they feel that their security is under threat. And that happened at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Poland and others actually triggered it then. It also was going to potentially happen in 2022, when you'll remember that a missile went over the border and killed 2 people in Poland. They were going to trigger it then until they found out that it was most likely that was actually a Ukrainian air defense that had come over. So they didn't at that point. But we're hearing already reaction, for example, from the Ukrainian foreign minister saying this is just Putin really trying to test the West. And I think that that is going to be a view that is echoed by many in Poland, by many in the Baltic states, by many in Europe, actually. And what they'll be looking at now is how can they bring this war to a close again? When are the sanctions coming? We know Donald Trump has threatened them. Again, we know that the EU is looking at a 19th sanctions package. What is the step now that can really bring Putin to the table and end this fighting?
Siobhan, great stuff. Thanks very much for that. By the way, we just had a bit of developing news on that coming from Reuters, quoting local Polish news, Polsat News, that a drone did strike a residential building in Wyriki, that's a place in eastern Poland. Nobody was injured. That's coming across Reuters, quoting Polsat News.